Alright, we're going to do a tomato review on this tomato right here, and I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that. It is in Russian, or it's translated from Russian that spells it like this. So I guess you would pronounce it as Vnuchok. I don't know what the Russian spelling of this tomato is, but this tomato originates from Russia. I'm not exactly sure. There is a small history behind it, but I can't really find a solid website that gives me enough history about it. So I don't know that much about it. I'll probably update the information down the road as I come across more information on this variety of tomato. But I do know that it originally originated from Russia, and it may possibly have been reintroduced from another gardener, something to that effect. There may be some other stuff behind it, but as far as I know, that's a Russian variety of tomato. Now, keep in mind, this is a determinate tomato, and it produces long bracts, not multiflora bracts, but long bracts. Multiflora bracts are like it looks like a showering grape of tomatoes hanging. That's called a multiflora. This is not a multiflora, but it is a longer type of bract where it might have 10 tomatoes on one bract, and it kind of hangs down, and the tomatoes alternate as they go down. So it's not like two tomatoes, two tomatoes, two tomatoes down the bract. I believe it alternates, if I remember correctly. I'm not 100% sure on that. The plant already died. I already harvested tomatoes, and we're just getting to the review now. So it is a determinate. It will die. It'll put out all its fruit and just basically drop dead on you, which I don't particularly care for tomatoes that do that, because you have to plan with determinate tomatoes a little bit better. So if you're going to do a succession planting, like you're going to start your tomatoes and get them planted, say in the beginning of April, and you start them indoors in like February or March, and then you get them outdoors by the beginning of April, then your harvest will be done and complete by the end of June, let's say. And now you already got another set of plants that you started, say, in May, that you're going to plant out in June as soon as these tomatoes are done. They call it succession planting, and that's good to do, but it's just a lot of work, and the timing has got to be right. You really got to know your seasons very well. If you live in an environment like I do, where the seasons are generally unpredictable, it's really hard to really scale that up, because one day I've seen frost come where I live as late as first and possibly even the second week of June. So you can't even plant really out here until even that one frost will destroy your entire growing season. So you really got to plan very good here. That's why I built the greenhouse. That's one of the reasons why. But anyway, let's get into the tomato review on this variety of tomato. So it is a Russian variety. It is a cherry tomato, and they're a little bit oblong or oblique, or I think oblong would be the right word for that. They're not perfectly round, so they got a little bit of a squareness to them, or they're you could kind of see they're just a slight bit longer. They're not flattened, they're just longer, wanting to turn into a pear, so to speak, or a plum tomato, but they're not plum tomatoes. Here's another one. Here's one that's a little bit more round. So it'll vary a little bit. They'll be round a little, but that doesn't mean that they're perfectly round. This one, if you look really close, you can see there's a lot of variations in it. So it's not a perfectly round tomato, but they do get a little bit on the round side. But most of them are going to be that kind of longer, they're going to be slightly extended longer than a regular round cherry tomato. They're not normally just perfectly round. All right, so here's a look at the inside. All right, try to give you a better look at that. It's a little bit. The seeds are generally darker green on these, but if you really let them ripen, these have been sitting out for a couple of weeks now, and if you really let them ripen up, they will turn the regular color of the rest of the tomato. It looks like a very good tomato. I have eaten quite a few of these, actually. I'm in the beginning of the season. As soon as tomatoes start coming off the plants, I'm munching them down. I'm not waiting. I'm eating them right away, and that's mainly because I'm deprived of my tomatoes, and so I need to get the first few that come off the plant. So I have sampled quite a few of these already, but I don't remember what they taste like. I remember saying, oh, that's not bad. I remember saying that, but I don't want to spoil it for you. So let's move that over a little bit. Let's try to get this scale in there. And hopefully you're all right with seeing it on the side like that. You know, it shouldn't be a problem. Just to give you an idea of the weight of what they are. A lot of times cameras will kind of, you know, images and videos and cameras kind of doesn't give you the full, you might be looking, in some cases, if I go really close like that, you might be like, wow, that's a big tomato. If I didn't use my hand and it was just like a regular paper background, you'd be like, wow, that's a big tomato, man. It's not. It's just, it's a cherry tomato. It's just I'm holding it close to the camera. So it kind of, sizing it by images or sometimes by video is a little hard to do. In this case, yeah, you can see it's in my hand, so it's small. But if I use a regular background like that, you can't really tell how big or small those are. So anyway, let's see what the weight is on this. It's about 0.4 of an ounce. I would imagine that's average. We'll grab another one. 0.4. 0.4. So they're about 0.4. We're not going to weigh everyone. So they're about 0.4 of an ounce. So they're actually not very heavy for a cherry tomato. And cherry tomatoes normally ain't very heavy, but that's about the weight that you're going to see. So let's go over there and get the bricks. Let's get the bricks meter and let's do a bricks test for you people that are trying to get an idea of what the bricks number is on these tomatoes. I give that to I mainly do the bricks for people who are more interested in growing it, a tomato with a certain bricks number. There are people out there like that, so that's mainly what it's for. But in realistic terms, for the average person, you don't need to know what the bricks is. Okay, so it's about 5 1/4, a little bit above 5 1/4 if you really want to slice hairs on it. So it's a little above 5 1/4. That's about average for a cherry tomato this year for me anyway. But cherry tomatoes should be between 7 and 10. That's a normal range. And if you get tomatoes that are higher than 10, that's usually a little sweeter than you'd probably want it for a tomato. That's not even really a tomato at that point. It tastes more like a berry. So anyway, let's give this a taste test. A little bit tangy on there, but the flavor is very nice. It's got a very nice tomatoey type flavor. Like that a lot. It's very nice. It's got a nice tomatoey flavor, but it's a little low on the sweetness. Again, that could probably be partly my fault, and if it is, we'll just have to bring up the lime next year. Again, I didn't put any lime in the soil. I was hoping that the lime that I put the year before in there was going to be enough, but sometimes it's not. All right, so let's get into this. I'm going to back you out a little. Okay. All right, so let's start off with the sweetness. Sweetness was pretty low on this. I'm going to say the sweetness wasn't any more than, on this particular tomato, wasn't any more than about 16, 18, somewhere in that range. It's pretty low, not very high in the sweetness. The tangy part was about average on a tangy. I'm going to say it was about 27 to 30 on the tangy, so you're somewhere in that range, and you're above average. You're above the middle mark, which would be roughly 25 would be in the middle. This was above the middle mark, so I'm saying it's about 28, 27, 28, maybe 29, somewhere in there. It wasn't overly tangy, but it had a good a good steadiness to the tangy part of it, so it was pretty nice as far as the tangy part went. Now, the tomato flavor was actually quite nice. It had a nice, rich tomato flavor, very prominent. If I was to give it a number between 1 and 10, I'd probably say it was just a little over 5, which would be on the average side of it. If it had more sweetness to it, I think it would have really brought the tomato flavor up as a whole, you know, perspective of the flavor. But the flavor itself, that part that hangs around the back of your tongue, I would say that was a little bit above average. So we're going to go 6 on the tomato flavor. The moisture part of it, the moisture was probably, I'm going to say 7 from a scale of 0 to 10. 5 being in the middle. We're going to go above that, and we're going to say that the moisture part of it was, I'd have to say, probably about a 7. It was pretty moist. It was pretty juicy. As soon as you eat it, the moisture came right out, and it really traveled. It really brought that flavor back to the back of your tongue. Tardiness, I'm going to give that a 2 because there was a little bit of a soury, tardy type flavor to it. Part of that enhancement of that tardiness is the lack of the sweetness on it. If that had more sweetness on it, that tardiness would have blended a little bit better with the whole profile of the tomato flavor. But it just lacked that sweetness, and because of that, the tardiness and the tanginess was a little bit more pronounced. But there was a little bit of a tardy flavor, a little bit of a sour, tardy or a sour type flavor, that mouth puckering. It did have a little bit of that. As far as undertones, there might be like maybe a 1 on the undertones. It wasn't very prominent, but there was maybe a little bit of a wild type flavor to the undertones of it. So there was something in there, but it wasn't unpleasant. It was just there was something in there. I just need to mention that being I picked that up. The texture of the tomato was pretty good. It was pretty chewable. It melted in your mouth pretty good. The skins were a little bit tough though. So when I'm talking about texture, we're talking about generally the consistency of the flesh on the inside, and then I like to throw the skin part in there in combination, because a lot of times the skins will break up with the tomato as you eat it, but sometimes the insides are nice, but the skins are really tough. So I am going to be including the texture of the skin with the, the thickness and strength of the skin with the texture of the tomato. The texture of the tomato, if I was to give it a number, I'm probably going to say texture of the tomato was probably about a 6, so it was pretty nice, a little above average. The skin, though, the skin part of it was a little bit on the thick side, and it just a little stronger than the tomato should have been. It's just, you have to chew it up a little bit. It became, eating it whole, you can break the skins up, but if you're going to cut them in half and eat them, that skin becomes like a little plastic bag in your mouth, getting stuck to the roof of your mouth. Now, I didn't particularly care for the thicker skins, but if you eat the whole tomato and pop it and chew it up like right there, it tends to break up better. If you're cutting them in half and putting them in salads, then it might be a little bit of a thicker skin that you may or may not care for. You might want to cut them into smaller quarters or something. Or just eat them whole, throw them into your salad whole, or make sauce with it like I do. The production of the plant was pretty good. I'm not going to say it was excellent. I'm going to say it's about average. It is a determinate plant, so it put out all its fruit, and then that was it. The plant pretty much just died. So production-wise, I'm going to go about middle of the road for a determinate variety of tomato like this. So it's nothing to brag about, but yeah, if you grow enough of them, you're going to get quite a few of these tomatoes. And if you do succession planting where you're growing that tomato maybe 2, maybe even 3 times a year, if you do it right, you'll get tomatoes all year based off of that method of succession planting. Again, I'm not one of the people who generally do succession planting because I don't live in a conducive environment for that type of growing, and that's generally why I don't do succession planting. And when you do succession planting, you really want to do that with determinate tomatoes. You don't want to waste your time with indeterminate, because you just want to get your indeterminates out as early as possible and let them produce all the way to the end of the year. With these determinate varieties, you got to grow them and they die, and then you got to grow them again and they die. And so the whole process to them, and so it's a learning curve when it comes to the determinate varieties. So just keep that in mind. Now, how would I rate this tomato overall? Number 1 being the highest, like number 1 tomato, and number 10, say, being the least likely. I would rate really low on the scale. So the highest number would be number 1. I'd probably rate this maybe a little bit above average. I'll rate it about a 4, and 1 being the highest. So you're 4. You're a little bit above average. You're above 5 would be average. So this tomato to me would be about a 4. But I got a feeling I could raise that number next year if I put a little more lime in the soil and grow the plant by itself away from other tomato plants. I think that this tomato plant, we can bring those numbers up a little bit as far as the texture, the quality of the tomato, and just the taste of it and the whole overall experience. A lot of things that really kept this tomato down was the tough skins and the lack of sweetness. Those are the 2 main things that are really kind of keeping this tomato variety from really achieving higher numbers. So if it weren't for those 2 things, I'd probably rate this up at a 3, but because it was lacking the sweetness and it was the tougher skins, those 2 things bother me a little bit. and so wasn't happy with that. And the fact that it is a determinate, so it's just a totally different growing procedure with these type of tomatoes. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, guys, that's it for your tomato review. So what I'm going to do is I am going to include the link in the description. You could visit hrseeds.com and pick up seeds there, or you can read about it in the description as well, and you can also visit the website. The link will be in the description, and it'll also be on my website. Now keep in mind that when I do update the descriptions on these tomatoes, a lot of times I'll search out the internet, see what other information I can find on it. And if I do come across more information, I am going to update the listing on my website. But I don't always update the listing, the description on the video. I don't know if that makes any sense. So if you're looking for the latest information, always go to the website and read the descriptions there, because that is where I make my updates. I don't go back to the old videos and a lot of times and update the description. I do if I got time to do it, but most of the time it's really hard for me to just take time out to do that with the video. So just keep that in mind. If you want to see the latest updates on the information on that, always visit the website and just see if I have any updated information in there. I'm not going to write update. You'll just see the description will be different than the description you see on the video. So just keep that in mind. All right, so that's it. That's your review for this Vnuchok tomato. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care, guys.